All right, we are at chapter 25 in the book of Isaiah. And chapter 25, we are, last week in 24, we talked and we're leaving out of the judgment of all the nations and getting into where it's going to start rolling into that judgment of the entire world. And chapter 25 is a song of praise after some of this bad stuff that's still yet coming for the world has come to pass. And so it's like a song of praise almost to the Lord. And it's kind of a song of praise coming from that believing remnant of folks, of saints that were preserved. There's a couple of images of a few things that are used in the midst of this. There's some deliverance. There's a deal talks about the past is gone, and and that this in the world, there's a conversion coming on and stuff. But anyway, we'll just kind of look through it and see how it talks to us tonight there. So let's look at verse number 1 real quick. O Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things. Your counsels of old are faithful and true. That's just talking about the prophecies that were and have been, all right? Because he talks about, what he was going to do, and there was always going to be a remnant left. There's praise of deliverance in these ruined cities. And these cities, as we talked about last week, they's kind of laid to waste. I mean, it's gone. Protective walls are down, there's just it's kind of looks like one of these fields, one of them old corn fields after they've harvested the corn. It don't look like nothing but straw and stubble everywhere pretty much, The place is kind of a wreck. Cities would no longer have to have safety or refuge. There's no need for it anymore because the enemy has been, destroyed. God's wrath was poured out. It affected everything and everyone, and everybody's going to know and see, and they're going to acknowledge God because this didn't happen by any other hand. No man did it. No army did it. No armies of the world or anything did it, God did all this. And there's going to be a praise coming from this remnant of people because maybe for the first time, sometimes it takes something pretty bad to knock us in the head and make us recognize something. Y'all been there and done that? Good things happen and we just kind of let them float on by, and then something bad happens and it makes you come to light about something. I think that's kind of what happened with some of these folks. I think for the first time, even this remnant, though they knew God, they believed in Him, they're actually seeing God for who He is and all His majesty at the time all of this stuff came about, okay? Verse number 2. For you have made a city a ruin, a fortified city a ruin, a palace of foreigners to be a city no more. It will never be rebuilt. The past is gone. It's a new time. These people have been delivered from all their enemies in the past, but it came at a great price because, like I said, he's pretty much wiped all this stuff out. Those cities with all them big walls and everything, all of that stuff's pretty much kind of laying in rubble, because it's not needed anymore is one thing. And you think, well, why did God tear all that stuff down and everything? There wasn't nothing wrong with it. Why did He tear it down? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because when we clean our closet, and y'all all know this, when you got saved, any of the sin in your life that you didn't deal with or do away with, most of us are still struggling with it today. I don't care how long you've been saved. If you don't deal with stuff, it just don't go away. And so that's why God was doing all this in the way that He did it. He didn't want them to have to depend on that being a refuge and a safeguard because He didn't want them knowing and He didn't want them thinking any longer that they needed a refuge, and he didn't want them thinking that they were better than someone else because they had this fortified city, okay? So that kind of all traces back to what we are today. When we get God, we need to clean house, so to speak. And if you still got stuff you're struggling with, you need to clean house. That's just the way it is, okay? Need to be delivered from all enemies of the past, and that's what he did. And so no longer are these city walls even needed for anything. Verse number 3. Therefore the strong people will glorify you. The cities of the terrible nations will fear you. Well, that's pretty plain. You know, there's a worldwide conversion coming on in this remnant of people that's left. You know, more than likely, and you know, the, excuse me, the millennium is running right up upon them then, you know. And this is really when man's going to, you know, turn to God in a great way, like the whole world's going to see God, you know, and recognize him. You know, and the greatest turning of man is still yet to come in all this, because all of this is still way yet to come in the future, okay? You know, when all this happens, the night of sin, what they call it, sin's going to be gone, you know. The great tribulation is over, the millennium comes in, and God's going to stand in the forefront, you know, of all of these things, okay? Verses 4 and 5. For you have been a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, a shade from the heat, for the blast of the terrible ones is a storm against the wall. You will reduce the noise of aliens as heat in a dry place, as the heat in the shadow of a cloud. The song of the terrible ones will be diminished. A lot of this stuff where he's comparing this stuff like to heat in a dry place as heat in the shadow of a cloud, things like this. These are all talking about Christ. They're talking about God. You know, if you'll take refuge with him, the rest of this stuff takes care of itself. You know, you got there's a consideration of all the things that have happened. Look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Imagine that. Two verse 4. I can look it up real quick. I know it. They always do. I have it highlighted. That should have counted. Pardon us, please. We're having technical difficulty. Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits at God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. They want to consider everything's happening. The thing, what this is telling us here is that as you look at it, you can't put yourself above God. No man did this. That God had done all this, okay? And God had a plan for all this. You know, and everybody went down. All of the enemies went down, you know, and God showed he's God because even the Antichrist fell down in all of this stuff. This is at the part where the Antichrist goes away. And so we know it's God and he's taking care of it. So if there's refuge in any of this stuff, though we don't need the refuge in the cities, we still need to take refuge in God. Even when these things get better, we still need to keep refuge in God, okay? Verse number 6. And in this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all people a feast of choice pieces, a feast of wines on the lees, of fat things full of marrow, of well-refined wines in the lees. All right. It's talking about better times coming to the earth. And when he talks about it on this mountain, he's just talking about the magnitude of the size of these things, you know, on this mountain. So in other words, there's a deal going on. And it's better times, and the earth is going to go back to producing things again. It won't just be stubble and stuff all over the place. The earth's going to produce bountifully. Not only will the earth have a physical bounty, but also there's a new spirituality, a new restoration that's coming in the midst of all these things, So there's a better time coming on. The earth's moving forward in this again. The reckon it's been done, and now progress is coming back on. Number 7. And he will destroy on this mountain the surface of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. Okay? The covering cast over the people, that's all this bad stuff that's been going on. That's all these persecutions. That's all these judgments that have been going on. And the veil that is spread over all nations, that's the stuff that was going on. And again, that's the punishments and the judgments. So there's a clearing, there's a cleansing of all this bad stuff that has happened. That's all the enemies that God had, all through the world. And that's who he got rid of, was all of these enemies, including the Antichrist again. And so all of this is going away, and the good times are rolling back in for God's people. Verse number 8. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. The rebuke of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. This is another deal about, forgiveness. Not going to be no more death anymore. The Lord's going to wipe away the tears from the faces, rebuke his people. I hope I gave you this one. 1 Corinthians 15:54. Huh? Man, I don't know what I gave y'all. 15:54. I must have just breezed right by there. Wasted a perfect good marker marking those things and didn't use them. Look at here. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this moral has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. And that's just God. He's taking care of the stuff that he said he's going to. This is the millennium coming in. This is like breaking ground. We're on our way to the new heaven and the new earth, when all of this stuff is going. Still a long time, but, that's all future, and that's all coming. So, it's going to take away that death thing out of this deal. Verse number 9. And it will be said in that day, behold, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation. So everybody that's been hanging in there waiting and going through this stuff and living on the earth and dead, things are kind of drawn to a close in this portion of time. And attention of the people, again, is drawn to God. The one that we have to, sometimes I say, somebody said, well, what about God? I said, well, God's the one we have to do with. They said, do what? I said, do everything. To do anything. You got to have God in the middle of it. So people were back wanting to do that again. They were deceived once by the Antichrist and by these enemies, and all the stuff that they did. But, then the real Christ, the real Messiah, the real ruler of this earth is coming forth in the midst of all this stuff. And, and man's going to be so glad, and man's going to rejoice in this. This is like a brand new salvation kind of a deal that's coming on, with this renewing of all of these things. And so it's gonna be exciting for mankind at this time. Verses 10 and 11. For on this mountain the hand of the Lord will rest, and Moab shall be trampled down under him, and straw is trampled down for the refuse heap. Okay, Moab. Anytime you read about Moab, and it talks about Moab, and Moab was supposed to represent a type of Christ, but not believing in the power of Christ, which is pretty weird, but that's what Moab was about. But here's the deal about Moab. When it mentions it, when you mention Moab, it's going to be the opposite of what God's got going on. If God's people are up, Moab's down. If Moab's up, God's people are down. And so here we see that Moab's down, so God is on the upswing again in all of this stuff. As these things are happening, God is, on the upswing of things. He's not that he's not always on top of everything, but everything's kind of, a lot of the enemies and a lot of the wrong stuff that was on the earth has been eliminated. So it's back on a good upswing for the things that God has in store, for the earth, I guess you could say. Verse number 12. The fortress of the high fort of your walls he will bring down, lay down, and bring to the ground, down to the dust. So, again, we talked about these fortress walled cities and stuff, and that stuff was a great form of pride. And so that's what this is talking about. This is talking about all the pride of mankind. It's going to be brought down. This is what it talks about in Matthew 5, verse 5. I didn't have that. In Matthew 5:5, because that's what it talks about, and the meek will inherit the earth. So he's going to bring a humbleness back to the people, and not living on pride, and not living on the self, and not living on the me of this world. He's going to have them looking closer back to what God desires to do. So that finishes up with with chapter 25. And then we roll into chapter 26. And what we're going to see, these first 8 verses, we're going to read through them. And what I want to tell you is that chapter 26 is like it's like a praise song, is really what this first part for sure of chapter 26 is. And, it's going to kind of tell about some of the rebuilding stuff. And so we're going to read through the first 8 verses. And this is going to be a song to be sung, but it's not one that's quite been sung yet, okay? So let's read through verses 1 through 8. You can just kind of roll them in there. And that day this song will be sung by the land of Judah. We have a strong city. God will appoint salvation for walls and bulwarks. Open the gates that the righteous nation which keeps the truth may enter in. You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. So it's all good stuff. Trust in the Lord forever, for in Yah, the Lord, or Yahweh, is everlasting strength. For he brings down those who dwell on high, the lofty city, he lays it low. He lays it low to the ground, he brings down the dust. That's all those prideful nations and stuff. The foot shall tread it down, the feet of the poor, and the steps of the needy. The way of the just is uprightness, O most upright, you weigh the path of the just. Yes, in the way of your judgments, O Lord, we have waited for you. The desire of our soul is for your name and for the remembrance of you. See, they're just singing a song of praise for all the stuff that God has done, the changes he made, the enemy's gone, and all of these things, okay? Verses 9 through 15, let's go through those. We'll talk about them. With my soul I have desired you in the night. Yes, by my spirit within me I will seek you early. For when your judgments are in the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. Let grace be shown to the wicked, yet he will not learn righteousness. In the land of the uprightness he will deal unjustly, and will not behold the majesty of the Lord. Lord, when your hand is lifted up, they will not see, but they will see and be ashamed for their envy of people. Yes, the fire of your enemies shall devour them. Lord, you will establish peace for us, for you have also done all our works in us. O Lord our God, masters beside you have had dominion over us, but you only we make mention of your name. But by you we only make mention of your name. They are dead. They will not live. They are deceased. They will not rise. Therefore you have punished and destroyed them and made all their memory perish. You have increased the nation, O Lord. You have increased the nation. You are glorified. You have expanded all the borders of the land. Okay, they went through the praise songs and everything. Then they kind of back up and they're reiterating one more time why they're praising God about all these things. And, this is something that they're worried about. The people are concerned about because in the very first of verse number 9, it talks about yet in the night. When it's in the night, he worried about it. When he's in the night, he was concerned about it. In other words, it's kind of like, I woke up thinking about you, Lord. This is heavy on their mind, all of these things. They're praising God, and they're kind of looking back at the things that were. They desired, to be closer, to the Lord. They desire to be close to him. They desire to serve him, because, that's what God has always told us in the Word. If you'll draw near to me, I'll draw near to you. And you draw near to God, God draws near to you. Something's going to change, He's pretty much, they're talking about, look, we're going to run to Jesus. No more are we going to run from you, okay? Because there was always a big thing. When you're a prideful person, you're not running to Jesus for stuff. You're turning to yourself. And when you turn to yourself, then you're running from God. And so they're saying, no more are we going to do that. We won't run from you anymore. Verse number 16. Lord, in trouble, they have visited you. They poured out a prayer when your chastening was upon them. They're reflecting back in these difficult days, In trouble, they visited you. Well, lots of people, when they're in trouble, cry out to the Lord. And so they poured out a prayer when your chastening was upon them. And, when God allows you to go into a place or when God puts a little drama on you about something, I think sometimes that's what causes us to draw near to him, A little bit of pressure sometimes goes a long way, but that's what these people were doing. They were looking back, again, considering after they praised him, they're looking back and considering all this stuff that we went through. Now, why were they doing that? I don't know, but I think that's a good thing. I think that you have to stop and look back at who you are and where you came from sometimes. Because I think if we don't, we forget who we are, we forget where we came from. And there was a guy told me a long time ago, if you don't check yourself, you wreck yourself. You got to remember where you came from. Verse number 17. As a woman with child is in pain and cries out at her pangs, when she draws near the time of her delivery, so have we been in your sight, O Lord. That's just looking back at the great tribulation and all these things again, because they went through some great pain and some hard times and all of this stuff. So, they're remembering these things. They're in these good times. Remember, they're in this good time, this praising God time. But you got to look back. Why am I praising God? Okay? So this praise that they got going on, it's not an empty praise. They're looking back at what they went through and they're praising God, for the things that they have now, the things that, the way things are now. Verse 18. We have been with child, we have been in pain. We have, as it were, brought forth wind. We have not accomplished any deliverance in the earth, nor have the inhabitants of the world fallen. Basically, what that says, we looked at a bunch of stuff and we worried about nothing. We thought we were going to have a baby. We just passed wind. Basically, that's what it's telling you. Basically, that's saying we was worried a lot about nothing, Lord, because, you were in charge. I read that, and I was looking at these people said about it, and I went, surely that ain't what that says. That's not really what that says. But that is what it says, it's they're looking at, the way things are going to go, and the way people went. They're looking at what are they going to do? What are they going to produce, or what won't we produce, Will we produce something worthwhile, or will it just be a lot of nothing, a lot of wind, And, and that all depends on the people who are left. And, the fact that they're looking to God, and they're praising God, and what they need to be doing. And we're going to go 19 through 21, and that's going to finish us up for tonight. Your dead shall live together with my dead body. They shall arise. Awake and sing, you dwell in the dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. Come, my people, enter your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself, as it were, for a little moment until the indignation is past. For behold, the Lord comes out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth will also disclose her blood and will no more cover her slain. Basically, what this is talking about, is the punishment's going to be the punishment. Whatever happened to these people, happened to these people. But there is a resurrection time coming, okay? That's what it's talking about, in the earth, and will no more cover up her slain and these things. It's resurrection. God's getting ready to start this new world order, this new millennium with all this stuff in it. And so it's going to be a new world with a whole lot of new stuff going on, and resurrection's going to be a part of that. So anyway. Okay, y'all, that's where we're going to end it up tonight. So thanks for everybody, if you're online watching. Appreciate y'all. Y'all come and visit us on Wednesday nights. Come and see us on Sunday mornings. And we appreciate y'all.